Hi, this video is on B1.7 Evolution. Pause the video momentarily and look at your learning objectives. What is evolution? Evolution is a gradual change in which organisms evolve over time. It's driven by natural selection and the survival of the fittest. Let's look at an example. Evidence of evolution comes from fossils and bone samples. So this is an evolution of a horse. If you look at the way the bones have changed in its legs over time, you can see that the leg has gradually become longer. This has probably allowed it to survive better because it's able to evade from predators. How does the leg grow longer over time though? This is a common misconception. A lot of students tend to think that because the horse moves to a new environment, it tends to change according to the environment. This is partially true, but the reason it changes isn't because of the new environment, it's because of a mutation. Now, if the DNA mutates, the organism might get a new characteristic. If that new characteristic is beneficial to its survival, then the organism is more likely to survive, and that characteristic through the DNA is likely to be passed on to generation. Okay, the story of evolution, it's about Charles Darwin really. And it involves over-reproduction, a struggle for existence and competition, survival, adaptation, inheritance of beneficial characteristics, and a gradual change. So the story of evolution. Charles Darwin on the HMS Beagle went on a voyage to the Galapagos Islands, and he noticed there was different finches on the islands and how their beaks were suited to the food source. So imagine we start on this island of Isabella, and on the island there are large seeds with a tough outer casing, and there are also these black finches. The black finches have quite a large beak, and this strong beak allows them to open the casing of the seed, and this allows them to have lots of food on this island. So if they've got lots of food, they're likely to survive. If they're likely to survive, then they're likely to breed, and if they breed, they pass on this characteristic of the strong beak to the next generation. And this is exactly what they do. They have offspring until the island becomes overpopulated, and this increases the amount of competition within the species. So one of the finches, or a couple of them, might migrate onto the next island, and they find there's still a food source there, but this time the seeds are much smaller. So for a while these birds can feed on the seeds, they probably have offspring. However, eventually one of the birds might have a beneficial adaptation, so mutation of the beak means they've got a smaller beak, allowing them to get to the food more easily. So which one is more likely to get the food? Well, this one. So the one with the smaller beak is better suited to get food, so it survives, and then it passes on those genes to its next generation. But we're at the same situation again where it's so well suited to the food source that it's over-reproduced. What happens next? Well, the finch has to make a decision. So it decides to migrate because there's too much competition on that island. On this island, it finds that the food source though isn't seeds, it's a small insect. Now, if a mutation happens which allows the bird to have a beneficial adaptation such as a longer beak, it may be able to eat food better, and this means this bird with a longer beak is more likely to survive. If this one's more likely to survive, it might mean the original species dies out. Let's look at some examples of evolution. You can see during the 20th century, at the start there was high levels of rats. So in the UK had a bit of a rat problem until about 1940, and then there was an introduction of a rat poison called warfarin. This caused the rat population to fall dramatically until about 1950. However, the graph shows the rat population starts to increase again. What was the reason for this? Well, there was a mutation in the rat's digestive system which meant they became resistant to the rat poison, and if they became resistant to the rat poison, they're more likely to survive, allowing the population to grow again. This is another example showing that evolution really exists. It was conducted in the late 19th century, around the time of the Industrial Revolution. Now originally, the very light coloured moth was the most prevalent, and there was lots of those around, and that was probably because the trees were covered in a lichen which was kind of a pale colour, meaning they were better camouflaged and less likely to be eaten by predators. However, because of the high levels of industrialisation, trees became covered in soot and the lichens died, which meant it led to them becoming a darker colour. This meant that the few butterflies which had a mutation which made them a darker colour were better camouflaged, so they were less likely to be eaten, so they were more likely to survive. Now the process of evolution eventually leads to speciation, and speciation is the formation of a new species, and when one species becomes better adapted to an environment than the older species, it often means the older species dies out and we've got a completely new species. So we can see here there's a gradual change, although we'd still find apes in some environments, we don't find Neanderthals anymore. If we look at this for another example of speciation, this species no longer exists because this species was much better at evading its predators, so this species was more likely to be eaten, hence less likely to survive. Meant that the original species would often be wiped out. We've provided evidence for Darwin's theory of evolution. We looked at fossils, we also looked at the rat poison and the peppered moths. And can we explain how organisms become extinct? Well, 3 reasons: natural disasters, not having enough food, or being preyed upon too much. Try to use these key words. So these scientific words